The Nexarian Empire had always been known for its mysteries, but none captured the galaxy's imagination quite like Princess Xalara and her mask. Not just any mask, a seamless obsidian face covering that reflected starlight like a black hole swallowing hope. The kind of accessory that made seasoned diplomats stutter and hardened warriors take involuntary steps backward. "Another one bites the dust," drawled High Chancellor Kex, watching yet another potential trade partner's ship hurriedly depart from the royal spaceport of Nexaria Prime. "That's the third this week. Must be some kind of record." The princess stood at her usual spot by the floor-to-ceiling window of the throne room, her reflection a dark slash against the stars. If she heard the Chancellor's comment, she gave no indication. The mask never moved, never tilted, never revealed even a hint of what lay beneath. Rumors about Princess Xalara's face had become the galaxy's favorite pastime. The Centaurian tabloids claimed she had been cursed by an ancient cosmic entity, her features twisted into something that would drive observers mad. The Proximan betting pools had odds running on everything from severe radiation burns to cybernetic implants gone wrong. The Orion Collective insisted she was actually 3 small aliens in a royal robe. "Your Highness," Kex ventured, his forearms arranging themselves in the traditional gesture of supplication, "perhaps if we considered a more approachable diplomatic stance." "The protocols exist for a reason, Chancellor." The princess's voice emerged from behind the mask, clear and melodious despite the barrier. "They have protected our people for 10,000 years. "Yes, but..." Kex's primary eyes blinked rapidly while his secondary pair remained fixed on a data tablet. "Our economic projections show a 47% decline in interstellar trade over the next cycle. The Mining Guild is threatening to withdraw their support, and the Merchants Consortium is already looking to the Aldebarian Alliance as an alternative trade partner." A subtle shift in the mask's position was all that betrayed the princess's attention. "And what would you have me do, Chancellor? Abandon 10 millennia of tradition because some off-worlders find it inconvenient?" The sarcasm in her voice could have cut through battleship armor. "The Council of Elders suggests..." Kex paused, all 4 hands fidgeting with his ceremonial chains. "Perhaps a slight modification to the royal protocols, something to make our potential allies more comfortable." The temperature in the throne room seemed to drop several degrees. Even the ever-present hum of the palace's antimatter core appeared to quiet itself. "Comfortable?" Princess Xalara turned fully now, the mask catching the light from Nexaria's 3 moons. "Was it comfort that saved our civilization during the Great Collapse? Was it comfort that protected us from the Void Plague? Was it comfort that..." The palace AI's chime interrupted her building momentum. "Your Highness, priority communication from the Terran Diplomatic Corps." Kex's secondary eyes widened. "Humans, they're actually responding to our outreach." "Patch it through," the princess commanded, her tone suggesting this interruption had better be worth it. The holographic message materialized in the center of the throne room, displaying the Terran diplomatic seal. As the message began to play, both Princess Xalara and Chancellor Kex would soon realize that the galaxy's most infamous mask was about to meet its match in humanity's most unorthodox diplomat. Ambassador Marcus Chen arrived at the Nexarian Royal Palace exactly 7 minutes late, wearing a suit that looked like it had been pressed in zero gravity and sporting a grin that suggested he'd just heard the universe's best joke. The Royal Guard, with their ceremonial plasma spears and perfectly synchronized movements, didn't quite know what to make of him. "Sorry about the delay," he announced to the thoroughly scandalized reception committee. "Had to stop and try something called a quantum curry at the spaceport. Fascinating stuff. Pretty sure my taste buds are now experiencing multiple dimensions simultaneously." Chancellor Kex's 4 hands twitched in barely contained distress. "Ambassador Chen, the royal protocols specifically state that all diplomatic envoys must arrive precisely on time, having fasted for exactly 6 hours prior to..." "Oh right, the protocols," Marcus snapped his fingers. "I read those on the way here. Well, skimmed them. Well, looked at the pictures. There were pictures, right? No, someone should really add some. Makes everything more engaging." The assembled Nexarian nobles looked like they might collectively faint. One of them actually did, their ceremonial headdress clattering against the polished floor with a sound that echoed through the suddenly silent hall. Ambassador, Kex managed through gritted teeth, you are about to enter the presence of Her Royal Highness, Princess Xalara. Surely you have been briefed on the gravity of this situation. Marcus's expression shifted to something that might have been seriousness if not for the persistent twinkle in his eyes. Absolutely. Masked princess, terrifies galaxy, probably needs a good laugh. Got it covered. Before Kex could have the appropriate diplomatic aneurysm, the grand doors to the throne room swung open. The assembled court immediately dropped into their ceremonial poses, a complex arrangement that looked like a cross between extreme yoga and interpretive dance. Marcus, meanwhile, gave an enthusiastic wave. Hi there. Love what you've done with the place. Very sparkly. Princess Xalara stood at the far end of the hall, the infamous mask turning slowly to face him. The entire court held its breath, waiting for the inevitable royal punishment for such casual irreverence. Instead, the princess's melodious voice filled the chamber. Ambassador Chen, you are not what we expected. Story of my life, Your Highness, but hey, expectations are just spoilers for reality, right? A noble in the front row made a choking sound. You do understand, the princess continued, her mask reflecting the room's crystalline lights, that your behavior thus far has violated approximately 17 different protocols? Marcus appeared to consider this. Only 17, huh? I must be losing my touch. Usually hit 20 before breakfast. And then something happened that sent ripples of shock through the assembled court. A sound emerged from behind the princess's mask that might have been, just possibly, a quickly suppressed snort of amusement. Chancellor Kex's secondary eyes began to twitch uncontrollably. The royal protocol master looked like he needed a stiff drink or possibly several, and somewhere in the back of the hall, another noble fainted, adding a satisfying thunk to the proceedings. Marcus Chen just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking for all the world like a man who had accidentally wandered into the galaxy's most formal event and decided to make himself at home. The scary part was, he seemed to be succeeding. Well then, Ambassador, Princess Xalara said with what might have been a hint of curiosity in her voice, shall we discuss why you're really here? Section 47, subsection 12, paragraph 9 of the Royal Protocols clearly states, Chancellor Kex's voice had reached a pitch typically reserved for dog whistles, that all diplomatic discussions must be conducted while standing on one leg, facing the third moon, during the hour of contemplative silence. Marcus Chen glanced out the window at Nexaria's 3 moons. Which one's the third moon again? Actually, better question, how do you know which one came third? Were you there? Did you count? The protocol master, a rail-thin being named Zix, looked like he might spontaneously combust. The sacred texts, explicitly. And another thing, Marcus continued, now hopping experimentally on one foot. Has anyone considered that maybe standing on one leg isn't the most efficient way to conduct diplomacy? I mean, what if someone has really bad balance? Are you discriminating against the gravitationally challenged? Across the chamber, Princess Xalara remained motionless, but there was something about the set of her shoulders that suggested she might be paying more attention than usual to the proceedings. Ambassador Chen, Kex managed through what sounded like several stress-induced aneurysms. These protocols have governed our diplomatic relations for 10,000 years. Yeah, about that. Marcus switched legs, wobbling dramatically. 10,000 years is a long time, like really long. Pretty sure some updates might be in order. When was the last time you all had a good protocol review? Maybe threw out some of the more, let's say, vintage regulations? A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. One of the court scribes dropped their ceremonial recording crystal, which shattered with a sound like breaking wind chimes. For instance, Marcus continued, now attempting to scratch his nose while maintaining his one-legged stance, that rule about having to recite the entire genealogy of your first pet before entering the royal dining hall. Bit excessive, don't you think? Especially since I never had a pet growing up. Unless you count that rock I named Fred. The protocol master's eye stalks were practically tied in knots. You named a rock? Fred was very emotional supportive. Marcus grinned at his own pun. Several nobles winced. Princess Xalara shifted slightly, the movement barely perceptible. Ambassador Chen, are you suggesting that our sacred traditions are outdated? Not outdated, Your Highness, just maybe in need of some creative reinterpretation. Like that rule about never eating blue food on Tuesdays. I'm thinking that was probably more about food safety back before you had proper refrigeration, right? Not so much a spiritual mandate. The princess's mask tilted ever so slightly. And what of the rule requiring all diplomats to wear their undergarments on the outside during the Festival of Transparent Intentions? Wait, that's an actual rule? Marcus's eyes lit up. That's amazing, though I have to ask, does anyone actually check? Is there like an underwear inspector? Because that seems like it could be a whole other diplomatic incident waiting to happen. A sound emerged from behind the mask that might have been a cough, or possibly a carefully disguised laugh. The court collectively pretended not to notice, though several advisors looked like they were suffering from acute indigestion. Your Highness, Chancellor Kex interjected desperately, surely you cannot be entertaining these blasphemous suggestions. On the contrary, Chancellor. Princess Xalara's voice carried a note of something that hadn't been heard in the royal court for centuries, amusement. I find Ambassador Chen's perspective quite refreshing. Refreshing? Kex's secondary eyes began to spin independently of each other. But the traditions, the protocols. Tell me, Ambassador, the princess continued, ignoring her chancellor's impending breakdown. What other insights do you have about our vintage regulations? Marcus beamed, still perfectly balanced on one leg. Well, now that you mention it, I've got some thoughts about that law requiring all serious conversations to be conducted while juggling ceremonial eggs. The grand reception hall of the Nexarian palace sparkled like a supernova had gotten drunk and decided to decorate. Crystalline chandeliers floated in perfect geometric patterns, their light refracting off walls embedded with actual stardust. It was the kind of room that made interior designers weep with joy, and insurance adjusters weep for entirely different reasons. Representatives from 17 different species filled the space, each trying their best to follow the 412 specific rules of Nexarian formal etiquette. The Centaurian ambassador's tentacles were tied in regulation knots. The Proximan delegation had arranged their eye stalks in the prescribed pattern of respectful observation. Even the normally rambunctious Orion collective had managed to merge into the officially sanctioned single consciousness, though one of them was clearly thinking about snacks. And then there was Marcus Chen, who had somehow interpreted the traditional Nexarian formal wear requirement as an invitation to show up in what appeared to be a suit made entirely of reflective material that changed color based on the ambient conversation topics. Is that diplomatic attire or a disco ball? Muttered Ambassador Vrax of the Aldebarian Alliance, their scales bristling with barely concealed disdain. Neither, Marcus replied cheerfully. It's a conversation starter, and would you look at that? It's working. Before Vrax could formulate an appropriately scathing response, a hush fell over the gathering. Princess Xalara had entered, her masked presence commanding immediate attention. The obsidian face covering seemed to absorb the room's spectacular lighting, creating a void in the shape of royal authority. Chancellor Kex began the traditional 17-part introduction, but was interrupted by the sudden materialization of an uninvited guest. High Commander Drax of the Vesperian Empire, Nexaria's greatest rival and perpetual thorn in the side of galactic peace. How unfortunate, Drax's metallic voice grated across the silence. I appear to have arrived without an invitation. A simple oversight, I'm sure. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. The Vesperian Empire had been pushing for war for months, looking for any excuse to break the fragile peace treaty. Commander Drax, Princess Xalara's voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of royal disapproval. This is a private diplomatic function. Private, Drax's cybernetic eye whirred menacingly. Like your face, Princess, always hiding behind that mask while your empire clings to outdated traditions and squanders its potential. Perhaps it's time someone unveiled the truth. The room's tension could have been cut with a knife served on a plate and declared a new delicacy. Several of the more sensitive diplomats began to edge toward the exits. That's when Marcus Chen, in his color-changing suit that had now shifted to a particularly aggressive shade of hot pink, cleared his throat. You know what this reminds me of? My cousin's wedding. Every head in the room turned to stare at him in confusion. Total disaster, he continued cheerfully. Mother-in-law showed up uninvited, wearing the same dress as the bride. Huge scandal. But you know what saved the day? The chicken dance. Commander Drax's cybernetic eye glitched. The what? Oh, you haven't heard of the chicken dance? It's an ancient Earth diplomatic ritual. Very sacred, very serious. Marcus's suit shifted to a sunny yellow. In fact, according to Section 73, subsection Q of the Nexarian Protocols, any uninvited guest at a diplomatic function can be challenged to a ritual dance-off. Chancellor Kex's mouth opened and closed several times. There is no such. Are you sure? Marcus winked. Have you memorized all 10,000 years' worth of protocols? Every single dance-related clause? The gathered diplomats began murmuring among themselves. Commander Drax's mechanical parts whirred in obvious discomfort. Unless, Marcus added, his suit now pulsing with rainbow waves, you're afraid of looking a bit silly? I mean, it's understandable. Not everyone can handle the sophisticated arm movements of the chicken dance. Very technical stuff. Princess Xalara's mask turned toward Marcus, and for a moment he could have sworn he saw a glimmer of something through the eye slits, perhaps approval, perhaps amusement, or perhaps just the reflection of his increasingly ridiculous outfit. Commander Drax looked around the room, realized he was quickly losing control of the situation, and did the only thing a cybernetically enhanced warmonger could do when faced with the prospect of performing the chicken dance in front of the galaxy's diplomatic corps. He retreated. This isn't over, he growled, though the threat lost some of its impact as he backed away from Marcus's enthusiastic chicken wing demonstrations. No, but it's a great intermission, Marcus called after him. Come back for the electric slide. As the commander's form dematerialized, the tension in the room broke like a soap bubble. The Orion Collective burst into what might have been laughter, or possibly hiccups. It was always hard to tell with them. Even some of the Nexarian nobles were failing to maintain their traditional stoic expressions. Princess Xalara stepped forward, her mask catching the light in a way that somehow managed to convey amused incredulity. Ambassador Chen, did you just prevent an interstellar diplomatic crisis with a fabricated protocol about poultry-based choreography? Well, Marcus adjusted his now softly glowing suit. When you put it that way, it sounds almost reasonable. The attack came during the ceremony of synchronized sneezing, which, as Marcus had pointed out earlier, was probably not the most tactically sound tradition in the Nexarian diplomatic arsenal. One moment the assembled dignitaries were preparing for their ceremonial nose-tickling with ritual feathers. The next, chaos erupted as hidden energy weapons activated throughout the chamber. Down, Marcus shouted, breaking at least 12 protocols about proper volume control during sacred ceremonies. He lunged toward Princess Xalara as particle beams crisscrossed the air where she had been standing moments before. The princess moved with surprising agility despite her formal robes, but a stray shot clipped the edge of her mask. A hairline crack appeared in the obsidian surface. Chancellor Kex's voice rose above the chaos. The sacred protocols strictly forbid touching the royal person. Section 89 clearly states, with all due respect to Section 89, Marcus interrupted, pulling the princess behind a ceremonial pillar as another blast scorched the air. I don't think our assassins filed the proper paperwork for this attack. Through the growing chaos, they spotted the attackers, Vesperian combat droids, their optical sensors glowing with malicious intent. Commander Drax's revenge, delivered with typical subtlety. The mask, Princess Xalara's voice carried an edge of panic. It's damaged. If it falls... Pretty sure imminent death trumps wardrobe malfunctions, Your Highness. Marcus peeked around the pillar, analyzing the situation. The royal guard was pinned down, and the other diplomats were scattered, hiding behind whatever cover they could find. The Orion Collective had merged into a defensive blob, which might have been helpful if they hadn't chosen that moment to stress eat. You don't understand, the princess insisted, one hand holding the cracking mask in place. The protocols exist for a reason. If anyone sees, another blast hit their pillar, sending crystalline shards everywhere. The crack in the mask widened. Protocol Master, Marcus shouted across the chamber. Quick question about emergency bylaws. This is hardly the time for... Zix ducked as a beam passed overhead, singeing his ceremonial headpiece. Actually, it's exactly the time. Section 42, paragraph 7 mentions exceptions to the mask protocol in cases of extreme danger, right? What? No, there are no exceptions. The mask must never... Are you absolutely sure? Marcus's voice took on a peculiar tone. Because I distinctly remember reading something about life-threatening situations. Maybe in the appendix, the footnotes, that one smudged page that might have been coffee-stained. The protocol master's eye stalks twisted in confusion. I don't... There are so many volumes. Exactly, Marcus grinned. So technically, we can't be certain there isn't an exception. And in the absence of certainty, saving the princess's life should probably take precedence, right? Princess Xalara's mask cracked further, a spider web of lines spreading across its surface. Ambassador Chen, what are you doing? Creating a loophole. He turned to face her directly. Your Highness, I know the mask is important, but right now we need to move, and that thing is falling apart. Whatever's under there, I promise you it cannot be worse than letting these tin cans turn you into cosmic confetti. A blast hit particularly close, and the princess flinched. The movement was enough. The mask's fractures deepened, pieces beginning to fall away. No one must see, she whispered, but there was less conviction in her voice now. Then they won't. In one smooth motion, Marcus stripped off his color-changing suit jacket. But we need to move. Now. The princess hesitated for one crucial moment, then nodded. As the mask finally shattered completely, Marcus swung his jacket up, creating an impromptu curtain between her face and the rest of the room. Ready, he asked, positioning himself to guide her movement while maintaining the cover. This breaks every protocol we have. I'm human. Breaking protocols is practically in our job description. They moved together, Marcus keeping the jacket raised as a shield while guiding them toward the secure exit. The Vesperian droids, apparently confused by this unorthodox tactic, actually paused their attack for a moment. That pause was all the Royal Guard needed. Energy weapons blazed, and the droids began falling one by one. Almost there, Marcus encouraged, carefully maneuvering them around debris. Though I have to say, all this mystery is making me seriously curious. Whatever's under there, is it really worth all this? No. He caught a glimpse, just for a second as they turned a corner. His eyes widened, and for the first time since arriving on Nexaria, Marcus Chen was completely speechless. Now you understand, the princess said softly. Marcus swallowed hard. Yeah, I really do. In the secure bunker beneath the palace, surrounded by royal guards and shell-shocked diplomats, Marcus Chen couldn't stop staring at Princess Xalara's now exposed face, not because it was horrifying or grotesque or any of the 1,000 terrifying things the galaxy had imagined, but because it was beautiful, impossibly, blindingly beautiful. Her skin shimmered like the surface of a neutron star, patterns of light dancing beneath a translucent epidermis. Her eyes were swirling galaxies, literally, miniature spiral arms rotating in irises that contained what looked like actual stars. When she moved, the light patterns shifted like aurora borealis across her features. Well, Marcus finally managed, that's definitely not what the tabloids were expecting. Chancellor Kex was having what appeared to be several simultaneous nervous breakdowns. The sacred protocols violated, the mask destroyed, the secret revealed. The secret, Princess Xalara's voice was resigned, that my people have kept for 10,000 years, the reason for our isolation, our strict protocols, our careful control of all diplomatic relations. The assembled diplomats stared in wonder. The Centaurian ambassador's tentacles had tied themselves into entirely new knots. The Proximan delegation's eye stalks were spinning like pinwheels. The Orion Collective had stopped stress-eating long enough to merge into a single mass of pure appreciation. You're living art, Marcus breathed. Your whole species, you're not just beautiful, you're literally radiating aesthetic perfection. We are cursed, the princess corrected. Do you know what happened to the last civilization that saw us as we truly are? They started a war, not to conquer us, but to possess us, to collect us like pretty baubles for their museums and menageries. The protocol master, who had been quietly hyperventilating in a corner, suddenly spoke up. The Great Collapse. It wasn't just a war, it was a galaxy-wide obsession. Entire civilizations fell because their leaders became so fixated on acquiring Nexarian specimens that they forgot to govern. That's why the masks, Marcus realized, the protocols, the isolation, it wasn't about hiding something horrible. It was about protecting everyone else from becoming enchanted. Precisely. Princess Xalara's galactic eyes fixed on him. And now you know. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Marcus looked around the room at the mesmerized diplomats. Already he could see the signs, the glazed expressions, the unconscious leaning forward, the subtle shifts toward worship rather than diplomacy. Then he started laughing, Everyone stared at him. The princess's bioluminescent patterns flickered in confusion. "I'm sorry," he wheezed, trying to control himself. "It's just all this time you've been hiding because you're too beautiful. That's like having a superpower and being afraid to use it because it's too super—" "This is no laughing matter," Chancellor Kex protested. "The fate of galactic civilization—" "Is exactly why this is hilarious," Marcus interrupted. "Look, Your Highness, you've been thinking about this all wrong. You're not cursed with beauty. You're blessed with the galaxy's most powerful diplomatic tool." The princess's stellar eyes blinked. "Explain." "Think about it. Commander Drax just tried to assassinate you, but now you have options. Option 1, put on another mask, maintain the isolation, and wait for the next attack. Option 2, schedule a face-to-face meeting with him." Understanding began to dawn on the faces around the room. "He'd be completely compromised," the protocol master whispered. "Exactly, but here's the clever part. You know it's coming. You can prepare for it, control it, use it constructively. Instead of hiding your species' gift, you could be using it to literally enchant people into peaceful negotiations." Princess Xalara's bioluminescence shifted to patterns that seemed thoughtful. "The protocols were designed to protect others from our influence." "But maybe some influence is exactly what this galaxy needs," Marcus suggested. "Not total exposure. We don't want another collapse. But strategic reveals, controlled diplomatic encounters, carefully managed peace talks." "Weaponized beauty," Chancellor Kex mused, then quickly added, "Speaking diplomatically, of course." The assembled diplomats began nodding, caught between their natural awe at the princess's appearance and their growing appreciation for this new possibility. "Besides," Marcus added with a grin, "I've been staring at you for the past 10 minutes, and I haven't started any wars yet." "No," Princess Xalara agreed, her galactic eyes twinkling with actual starlight. "You haven't. In fact, you're the first being in recorded history to see our true form and respond with laughter." "What can I say? Humans have a unique perspective on beauty. We find it inspiring rather than overwhelming, probably because we spend so much time making up for our own lack of it." The princess's face lit up, literally patterns of light dancing across her features like celebrating stars. Perhaps that's exactly why your species should be our primary diplomatic partners. You see us as we are, but remain you." "Is that a job offer, Your Highness?" "Consider it a proposition, a new protocol, if you will, one that combines your human irreverence with our Nexarian attributes." Marcus bowed with exaggerated formality. "I accept on one condition." "Yes?" "We update that rule about the chicken dance, make it official." Commander Drax's face when he thought he'd have to do it. Priceless. And there, in a secure bunker beneath the Nexarian palace, surrounded by awestruck diplomats and violated protocols, Princess Xalara did something that hadn't been seen in 10,000 years of hidden history. She threw back her head and laughed, her joy lighting up the room with actual stellar phenomena. One standard galactic year later, the Nexarian Empire had undergone what political historians would later call the Great Glamour Revolution. Though, to be fair, they called it that mostly because the time when really pretty aliens started using their prettiness for political purposes wouldn't fit in the official records. The new Nexarian Human Diplomatic Corps had established a system that Chancellor Kex dubbed Strategic Beauty Deployment, though Marcus insisted on calling it Operation Gorgeous Peace. Under the new protocols, now with added pictures just as Marcus had suggested, carefully controlled diplomatic reveals of Nexarian features had resolved 3 major interstellar conflicts, prevented 2 wars, and somehow convinced the Orion Collective to finally use napkins at state dinners. "I still can't believe it worked on Commander Drax," Princess Xalara mused, her galactic eyes sparkling with amusement as she reviewed the latest diplomatic reports. She no longer wore the mask within the palace, though a new fleet of fashion designers had created a line of stylish, partial veils for public appearances, now more fashion statement than fortress. "Worked," Marcus snorted from his new office, adjacent to the throne room, which he decorated with what he claimed were traditional Earth diplomatic artifacts. Most suspiciously resembled disco balls. "The man practically wrote a sonnet about your eyebrows during the peace negotiations, though I'm pretty sure starlight cascading through the cosmic dance of destiny isn't actually proper diplomatic language," says the man who included Protocol 74B, the Macarena Clause, in our new diplomatic handbook. Hey, that's a legitimate emergency response procedure now. You saw how it diffused that tension with the Andromedans last week. The protocol master, passing by with an armful of updated regulatory volumes, now featuring full-color illustrations and the occasional meme, shuddered at the memory. I still maintain that group choreography should not be a cornerstone of interstellar diplomacy. Funny, Marcus called after him. That's not what you said during the Centaurian peace talks when you led the conga line. The changes weren't just diplomatic. Nexarian culture itself had begun to evolve. The younger generation had started a fashion trend of partially revealed features, carefully regulated to prevent mass infatuation, but enough to create what fashion magazines called the glitter government look. Some particularly progressive nobles had even begun experimenting with transparent face coverings that created artistic blur effects. The royal palace itself reflected the changes. The traditionally austere halls now featured occasional appreciation safe zones where Nexarians could display their natural features without risk of causing diplomatic incidents. These rooms came with warning signs that Marcus had personally designed, reading, "Caution, extreme beauty ahead. Please sign waiver before entering. No photography, sketching, poetry writing, or spontaneous marriage proposals allowed." "Have you seen the latest poll numbers?" Princess Xalara asked, her skin shimming with patterns that indicated amusement. "Apparently, our approval rating is at an all-time high, though I'm not sure about this new trend of calling us the glitter government." "Better than what they used to call you," Marcus pointed out. "Besides, I think it has a nice ring to it. Very disco-diplomatic. You and your Earth music references." But her face lit up, literally, with fondness. "Though I must admit, some of your Earth customs have proven surprisingly useful. I particularly enjoyed watching the Vesperian trade delegation attempt to breakdance during last month's economic summit." "Ah yes, the famous break the ice by breaking your spine approach to diplomacy, classic Earth technique." The princess's stellar eyes twinkled. "You've changed us, you know, all of us. 1,000 generations of tradition, and along comes one human with a questionable fashion sense and a complete disregard for protocol." "Hey, I resent that. My fashion sense isn't questionable. It's absolutely terrible, and proud of it." Outside the palace windows, Nexaria Prime sparkled in the triple moonlight. The city had changed too, becoming a hub of interstellar diplomacy where beauty was no longer hidden but carefully channeled. Art galleries now featured special intensity-adjusted viewing rooms for Nexarian works. Diplomatic training included courses like aesthetic impact management and advanced compliment deflection. "You know what the best part is?" Marcus mused, watching ships from a dozen different species dock at the spaceport. "Nobody's started a war over you guys in months. Turns out, when you're open about being overwhelming beautiful, it becomes a lot less overwhelming." "A rather human perspective," the princess noted. "Well, somebody had to point out that being too pretty to look at is a pretty good problem to have. Better than being too ugly to look at, which, let's be honest, describes at least 3 species in the Outer Rim." Ambassador Chen. "What? I'm practicing diplomatic honesty. It's in the new protocols, Section 96, right after the section about proper limbo technique for crisis negotiations." Princess Xalara shook her head, creating a miniature aurora borealis effect. "Speaking of diplomatic honesty, the Galactic Council is convening next month. They've requested our unique approach to conflict resolution." "Let me guess, full reveal, carefully controlled environment, mandatory sunglasses for all participants?" "Actually, I was thinking we might try something new. How do you feel about teaching the entire Galactic Council to do the YMCA?" Marcus's face split into a grin that threatened to break several local lightspeed regulations. "Your Highness, I thought you'd never ask." And so, as Nexaria's 3 moons rose over a changed empire, a human ambassador and a literally stellar princess continued their mission of bringing peace to the galaxy, one dance move, one carefully revealed feature, and one broken protocol at a time. Though they did eventually have to add a rule about excessive use of glitter in diplomatic documents. Even peace has its limits.